All right, we're live. Yay! Hi, and welcome to this event with Mark Oshiro and Zoraida Córdova for The Insiders, Mark's middle grade debut. Woo! I'm Carter. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the event coordinator here at Astoria Bookshop. We are the bookshop hosting this event. So if you don't know who we are because you found us through the magic of the internet, we are a bookshop in Astoria, Queens, in New York City. Before we get started, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping things. You will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout this event. So if you do have questions, put them in the question function down there at the bottom. And Zoraida is going to go through those and pop them into different parts of this conversation. And you can chat with one another in that chat on the right over there. But we will kick you out if you participate in any trolling, any racial, ethnic, or homophobic slurs. Basically, I'm asking you all to be nice and respectful towards one another. Finally, there is also a button down there at the bottom that offers the option to buy The Insiders with what I would consider the best signed book plates that I have ever seen from any author.
I have where do I have them? I want to show them off.
So unprepared, Mark Oshiro.
I have these signed by Lexis Henderson. Look at these things. Wait, hold on.
They're so cool. They have Mark with like a flower crown. Yeah. They're so cute.
I took that picture and made that garland. I'm so proud of it.
It's your legacy.
Yeah.
So let me introduce you to these two fantastic guests, and then they will take over. So Mark Oshiro uses they, he pronouns, is the award-winning author of the YA books Anger is a Gift and Each of Us a Dessert. Both of which actually I think are on my staff picks list. So while you're grabbing The Insiders, you should grab those, and I might throw in some book plates for you. So when they are not writing, they are busy trying to fulfill their lifelong goal of petting every dog in the world. The Insiders is their middle grade debut. Zoraida Córdova is the acclaimed author of more than a dozen novels and short stories, including the Brooklyn Bruja series, Star Wars Galaxy Edge, A Crash of Fate, and The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina. In addition to writing novels, she serves on the board of We Need Diverse Books and is the co-editor of the best-selling anthology, Vampires Never Get Old, as well as the co-host of the writing podcast Deadline City. She writes romance novels as Zoe Castile. Zoraida was born in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and calls New York City home. When she's not working, she's roaming the world in search of magical stories. So welcome to both of you. Woo! Now I'll let you two take over.
Thank you,
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm pretty excited. I'm also exhausted because I was in New York yesterday signing hundreds of books, left this morning, and have been signing books in Atlanta and just sweating.
You're in Atlanta now?
Yeah, I flew back this morning, and I'm exhausted.
God.
Yeah. But, I mean, what's the best thing to be? Because now it's, as Kwame just in the chat, it's chaos time.
Chaos. It is chaos time. Kwame, you're chaos too. So I wish, we were all here. I wish we were all in person celebrating you, celebrating this book. I love this book so much. This is the book of yours that, it punched me in the gut. The last few things that you've written have actually punched me in the throat and said, I'm going to make you cry today, Zoraida Córdova. And those should be the real titles of these works, including your short story in the Reclaim the Stars anthology, February 2022.
The art arrived earlier today.
Yay! Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
So beautiful.
And your short story, not your short story, excuse me, your essay in Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed.
Yes.
Is so beautiful. It is my favorite piece of that collection. The whole collection's great. But so this is just me expounding my feelings about you and how wonderful. And thank you so much for asking me to do this event with you.
Yeah, of course. In honor, of you doing this event, I have something. Well, I have two things here. One of them I can't show on camera because this is a middle grade event. But I do keep two things on my desk at all times, and one of them is this, which is a spoon, metal spoon from Jenny's Ice Cream in Nashville,
Tennessee,
which Zoraida stole and then blamed on me because she hates brown people, and she wanted to get me in trouble.
So for all of you watching, you can take that spoon.
No,
I know that
the sample spoons from Jenny's. They're not to give away.
In my defense, Mark, in my defense,
to get away with it.
In my defense, I really wanted it, and
Zoraida in court. Zoraida in court. Your Honor, I just really wanted it. That's why I stole it.
Yeah. Anyway, so please tell. Sidebar.
Yeah.
I also want to tell people that I would hide this spoon in Mark's things. Like we would go to conventions and I would leave it. I would go into his room, and leave it in the toiletry bag.
Yeah.
Or go to our office, and leave it on their desk.
Hide it. You
hide
wouldn't
it.
go openly. I would find it much, much later. And no matter how many times I was like, take your evidence of thievery back, it kept showing up. And so now sits on my writing desk in my new office, little library space, of your crimes.
Oh, well, so let's talk about middle grade and writing, being responsible adults who write for children. Mark,
sorry, don't steal things.
Tell us about the Insiders.
Yeah.
For those of us who are living under a rock.
Yeah, The Insiders is my middle grade debut. It is the first story period that I ever wrote for middle grade. I have a short story out next month in This Is Our Rainbow. That is the second middle grade thing I ever wrote. But I had never written middle grade before this. The Insiders is about 3 kids in Orangeville, California, which is a sort of distant suburb outside of Sacramento. And it mostly focuses on Hector Munoz, who is a 12-year-old kid who grew up openly gay in the Mission District in San Francisco. And because of his mom's job, is forced to move to this sort of small town, or at least small town mentality. I wouldn't say Orangeville is a very small town itself. And sort of has to contend with the fact that the things that were very normal for him in San Francisco make him look weird and strange, in part also because of how he dresses, in part because of he was a theater kid and there's no drama department whatsoever here. And so he becomes the focus of ire from 3 bullies who definitely aren't based on the 3 main bullies I had in 7th and 8th grade at all.
Mm.
Actually, this is where I can reveal a secret that I don't even think my editor knows. Sorry that you're going to find this out right now, Stephanie. One of them is the name of my bully. And it used to be another name because I was like, don't name characters after real people. And then I was like, never mind, I'm just going to do it. So anyway, and so one day while fleeing from these trio of bullies, he hides himself in a janitor's closet, and he understands the irony that he's now literally back in the closet, except each day this closet seems to appear in a different part of campus, and then it starts growing, and then it magically introduces him to 2 other kids across the United States. Both were on the cover, beautifully illustrated by Helder Oliveira. This is Juliana, and this is Sal. Juliana is from Charleston, South Carolina. Sal is from outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And the 3 of them not only become friends, but learn to solve one another's problems through the weird magic of this room. And so it is both an adventure novel, little bit of coming of age, but it's a movie, or not a movie, it's a book about the weight of secrets and the power of friendship, particularly friendship among queer and trans people, and what that feels like to find your community and how loving it can be. It's a very chaotic book too. I had a lot of fun writing how silly it is at times, and the weird magic just sort of doing what it wants rather than being wielded like you would expect in sort of a fantasy novel. No one can control the magic here. It just seems to have a mind of its own for maybe reasons, but you'll have to read to find out. But.
You're Latinx. Can we call this magical realism?
Yeah, and actually my editor was, there was a draft of this that was much more fantasy with the kids actually wielding powers, and it was my editor who pushed me more towards what would be magical realism and pushing me towards a place where the kids never got magical powers, but instead the magic of the room itself helped them to start looking at their problems as, well, I'm not alone, so how do I solve this problem if I have someone who's on my team? And I loved getting to write that. That was not really something that I had done before, and I think it served the story much better than having them actually have magical powers.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Very serious question. How did you build this closet? What part of IKEA did you go to find the parts?
I went to the homophobia section. No, okay. Kwame, I dislike Kwame so much. So, true story, I did some of this work before I ever technically started this book. I wrote a book when I was 18, 19 years old, when I was a freshman in college. I thought it was a young adult book. It was about a kid named Hector Munoz, Mexican-American kid who's gay, who found a magical portal in their closet that led them to a magical world that was, well, I'm not going to get into that because that part is actually my next middle grade book, but we'll get there. But I held on to this manuscript for many years. It was rejected by everyone who happened to not ignore it, which wasn't very many people. And when I was considering writing middle grade a few years back, I always go, whenever I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready for a new story, I go through my old ideas and my old drafts to see if there's something there that still resonates for me. And I reread this book, and it wasn't very good, and I get why it was rejected. It wasn't that great. I didn't really know what I was doing at 19 years old, but there was still this idea of this magical closet. And so that's where it actually came from. Except in this one, I was like, well, what if the magical closet is a literal manifestation of a safe space? Because we talk about the idea of what a safe space is for people of color, for queer people. And I was like, well, what if there was a room that provided a safe space, and what does that mean? And what does it entail? And so as you go through the book, you learn the very basic rules at the beginning, and then as the book goes along, the rules of the room sort of reveal themselves. But they only do through trial and error. There's no direct communication. There's no like magical note or like psychopomp who shows up to explain to you. The kids just sort of have to figure it out. Sometimes by very grave error, and they make mistakes in using this room. But I wanted it to be this sort of exploration of how to form community and the difficulties in doing that, because sometimes in trying to form a community, we hurt one another. So yeah, that's sort of where it came from. It is a very old idea that took 17 years to become a book. So hold on to your old drafts, everyone. Even if you think they're terrible, there could be an idea in it that you could use later.
That's what I wanted to say. I feel like you are an example of somebody who, you know, you hold on to your work in such a way that it's not, you don't take the rejection and like burn the bridge behind you for that story. And I think that as writers, a lot of writers, you know, you hurt so much because of that rejection that you're like, I can't look at that thing ever again. And yeah. I did that when I was 19 and my first novel got rejected. I was just like, I'm never writing again. I'm never getting published, right? And you know, you know me, like I'm fucking dramatic for no reason.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's a lesson in the way that you have been able to revive stories, because it's not just that somebody couldn't see your vision, but it's that you have a clearer vision now that you're in a different stage of your life.
Yeah.
And so you've done that with this book. You did that with mirrors, selfies, mirrors, windows, and selfies.
Yeah.
For Vampires Never Get Old. And so it's just finding a new way, a new entry point into a story.
Part of it is also just the more you write, just you gain knowledge and wisdom through experience. And one of the big revelations I had about the original story was that the protagonist was just too old. It wasn't a story that fit a young adult story. It wasn't about transition to adulthood. It wasn't about, you know, moving from one world to a completely new understanding in a different world. It was more about that first realization that maybe the world is a little more complicated than you thought before, and starting to view adults as like individual people who aren't necessarily parents. And so all of that time I spent away from this manuscript. And then when I came back to it, I was like, oh, this is a middle grade story. It's just the wrong age group. And it came together so much more quickly than I expected. Once I was like, well, if I make this kid 12, what does the story look like? How is it different? It also meant, and I admit that this was very intentional, it also meant I knew from the start that I could be sillier. I feel like this book is the closest to my actual personality, because I get people who read Anger is a Gift and Each of Us a Desert, and I love those books with my heart, but then they'll like attend an event and they're like, why are you funny? Because they're not funny books. Like I don't, you know, I haven't written a YA book that's funny at all. And this one, I mean, there are poop and fart jokes, which is also great, but also, you know, I don't think I could have gotten away. For example, there's a character in this book I love so much named Taylor. I refer to him as my pre-himbo, because you know this kid is going to grow up and become that like really dumb jock who is just sweet and kind to everyone, but says things and you're like, do you live on this planet? And writing that character was so fun, but I don't see a place in the YA that I write now that character really fits in. And so for me, I got to just lean into the chaotic silliness of me in this book, and it was so that I don't think I had the confidence to do that when I was younger. I wanted to be, I mean, you want to be like the serious author that everyone thinks you're the best and your writing is the best. And while there is still a part of me that wants to do that, I really love letting go and being like, let me just tell a good story, and also I want to make you laugh as much as possible. So yeah.
I feel like we have a similar like people have similar impressions of us, because I remember, I forgot which one of our friends met me in, like when they met me in person, was like, you're not as serious as you look in your photos. And I was like, yeah, because the author photo is like,
yeah, I mean,
and the real personality
photos are they look very serious and professional and poetic, and like, and there is parts of us that represents, but like we're I mean, we literally started this event with you stealing a spoon. Like that's Zoraida, like that's you, that's our relationship. And then you add like our other work wife who we had the office with, Danielle, who I know is hiding in this chat somewhere.
Yeah.
And the three of us, like get the three of us in a room and we're serious, what, 10% of the time? Like
maybe less.
That's generous.
Oh yeah, that's very generous. I mean, I think it's just the nature of creativity, right? Creativity can't be this burden, right? Creativity has to be joyous in many ways. And yeah, we can write books about important things, but that doesn't mean that we have to like live with this sad burden all the time.
I feel like my YA career is probably going to be mostly sad gay books, like, because that's just what I want to write. I really like writing that kind of stuff. And the next YA book is the angry queer book, which is, we'll talk about that later. But
I don't know, Mark, I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard that anger is a gift. So
what would have happened if I just like closed this window out and left and didn't come back to the event? What if that happened?
Oh! Anyway, I have a very important question from Natalie C. Parker here that says, Mark, at one point in life or writing in general, did you decide to center queer stories as opposed to writing queer stories for a straight gaze?
Straight gaze. Sorry. That's fine. Well, I don't know that. Because even when I looked back at the original manuscript, I think maybe there was a little bit of writing this for straight people, but mostly I wrote it because I was like, I'm queer, I'm Latino, there's no books about me. I just want to write this ridiculous fantasy adventure starring someone like me. And I wasn't really thinking of like, let me teach straight people what it's like to be queer. Let me teach what this experience is like. In fact, I found very little of that first book to be very like educational at all. But I then didn't write fiction for a very long time because those rejections were so brutal to me. But when I started again in my late 20s, it was, it definitely made it harder. It definitely made it longer to be published. I remember how many, I mean, Anger is a Gift was the first novel I wrote after this one. And that one was rejected 43 times before I got a yes. And that was 43 times over the course of almost 2 years, and constantly revising it in between. But one thing like, with that book was always what it was. Like, I mean, it had different genre elements in it, but it was always a very queer novel. So I'm very much one of those writers who just wrote and still kind of writes very selfishly. I'm like, this is just what I want. I don't really care if you learn. Like, I'm always shocked and honored and flattered when people are like, I learned a lot from Anger is a Gift, or I learned a lot from Each of Us a Desert. And I'm like, cool. I appreciate that. I mostly, as you said, I want to punch someone in the throat, literarily. That's not a word, but it is now. Literarily.
It is now. We've made it a verb.
So I don't know.
I think
when you don't have it and there's so little of it, it just was like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I would rather commit to this taking longer than it probably should in order to make it happen. Does that mean it does? I mean, it does mean, like, again, I think it delayed being published. I think I was still a pretty decent writer 8-9 years ago when I was writing this. I've certainly gotten better, but I don't think I was at a level where it was so bad that that's why no one, you know, when I queried agents, they weren't interested. I think they were like, this is a queer book. There's almost no white people in it. I don't know what to do with this. And sometimes they told me that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we all know that publishing is not a meritocracy, and it's
it's
not always talent that gets people published.
No,
so
not at all.
I think, but thankfully you have, I've watched your writing grow, and it's really a beautiful thing to see that. So hold on. What was a 11 or 12-year-old you like? Because for me, you know, when I was writing middle grade, I know that I write books for the person that I was at that period of time, but I think I've decided that I'm writing the who I wish I was at that period of time. So my recent middle grade that's coming out next year, Valentina Salazar is Not a Monster Hunter. That book, that I wish I had been that kind of girl, right? Like more confident, more loud, right? And at some point after I left Ecuador and came to America, and it might have been, sorry, I dropped my phone. It might have been the language barrier that made me become shy because I didn't want to say things wrong.
Right.
But it stuck for a very long time. And so I was a shy, quiet kid. You would never know that if you're my friend now and spend 2 seconds with me. But so what were you like?
I was unrecognizable. I was terrified as a middle school kid and elementary school and middle school. And I would say probably the first year or so of high school, that version of me is nothing like this because I'm now a huge extrovert. Many of the people in this chat can vouch for the fact that I don't give an F about anything. I will just say whatever. I have a lot more courage in public. I have no nervousness around public speaking or anything. But no, in junior high, I was wildly unpopular. I was also heavily bullied, heavily bullied, which is always weird to think about in hindsight because I was made fun of because everyone thought I was gay. But now in hindsight, I'm like, well, you were right about that. Like you were. Yeah. I was. You all read all the signs. Yes, that was right.
Imagine if you turned around and been like, yeah, so.
Well, and that's where you talk about, and I relate to that so much. Hector Munoz is what if I had grown up in a place where that was okay? So that part is a complete fantasy. I have no idea what that world is like as a kid. However, the part of me that is very real in the book is when Hector gets to Orangevale, and particularly when he has interactions with Miss Heath. I wrote an essay for, I don't think it's up yet. Maybe it goes up tomorrow, for School Library Journal about how much I wish kids were believed. Because when I was bullied, I actually went to a counselor who said it was my fault that I was being bullied. If I had stopped wearing tight clothes, if I stopped doing this with my wrist, if I acted more like a man, everyone would leave me alone. And there I was like, it was the first real experience I have where I was like, oh, I don't think I can trust adults at all. In fact, oh, it is up. Thank you, Jackie. I didn't realize it was live. Yeah, Sarah, awful counselor.
Yo, I'm gonna find this person.
I should look them up actually and see what they're doing. Because I have looked at one of my bullies and they're in prison, so I won that.
Oh my God.
I won that.
Mark's story. I feel like you could send that counselor a book and just say, this is for people like you who didn't believe me. And maybe they're too old. You don't want to what if it's the last thing they ever read?
I'm actually kind of fine with that.
Yeah.
Great, literally.
That's fine. I'll do it. I'll do it so your hands are clean.
Answer your question a second way, which is I'm now revealing this to all of you. I'm pretty sure none of you have seen this because I've shown it to almost no one. And I was telling Zoraida beforehand, I don't think I've shown it to Zoraida and Danielle in particular because I feel like they're going to use this against me. This is me. I am freshly 12 years old, despite that I look like a full-grown adult in this. This is at the midwinter dance in 7th grade.
I can't handle that. You're 12?
Let me do this. I'm 12 years old in this photo. I'm trying to get it to zoom in. It's not doing it. I wish I could put it in the chat, but I am 12 years old, surrounded only by women. Oh, there we go.
Oh my God, Mark, your plaid shirt.
And weirdly baggy pants. Also, like half the people in this photo are now not straight. It's great.
I found a picture of myself
with 4 of these people. 4 of these people. Katie, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. Courtney. Anyway, so I mean, but if you look at, there's just if you could see this blown up, there's just such an intense, awkward energy, and it was me. I just wasn't used to socializing with other people. I was very quiet. I was absolutely like teacher's pet, super smart. That was the only thing I was good at, was like being good at school or whatever. And it wasn't until high school that I started to become this person that you now see in front of you.
The amazing person.
Middle school me was like,
you just needed to come into yourself and figure that out.
Yeah. It worked.
Okay.
I'm great about it.
So Steve asks, or says, happy release day, Mark. Any thought given to the age of the room? I wonder if Steve means like how long it's existed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the room is what the name that the 3 kids give the closet, because it does not always appear as a closet to whoever it appears to. And each of them reveal what the room looks like. So they just start calling it the room, capitalized T, capitalized R. All I can say is I know exactly how old it is. And there is more information in the book than you probably think there is about it.
What do you mean? Mark.
There is stuff in the book that very few people have picked up on, but I deliberately wrote it that day because someday I want to write a sequel. And the sequel will answer your questions. But I can't, that's all I'm going to say.
Should we call 2 room 2 secret?
2 inside, insiders 2 out. I don't know. 2 room, I like 2 room 2 secret.
Sorry, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually wondering if you and I would have gotten along as 11-year-olds. I think that I was really annoying. I think I still am really annoying. But I feel like back then I just wanted people to be my friend.
Yes.
I still want people to really be my friend.
I still do too. And I still actually struggle with in therapy, we talk about this all the time, that feeling of if you were young and you were constantly desiring that feeling of like, I just want friends like other people have friends, and you don't deal with that stuff in any sense when you're younger, you tend to grow up and still have that feeling. And that being said, I don't want to get rid of like wanting to be friendly and wanting to have friends or whatnot, but I think we would have gotten along because we both had very similar music tastes, and my friends at the time, the few who were like willing to sort of commit, you know, the social sacrifice of hanging out with me tended to be people who liked the same kind of music as me. And so I listened to a lot of like punk rock and ska and hardcore and metal. And I was super into like the West Coast hip hop artists at the time. So it was sort of like hip hop and alternative music. And I tended to have friends in those groups because it was sort of like, you might be an acne covered nerd and none of us like you, but you know who Safe Ferris is, and you know who, you know, Good Riddance is, which, hi Steve, I know you're here. But like it was that thing of like, you could be a weirdo and maybe no one would like you, but because you like these very specific things that not a lot of people like, it was sort of like, well, we'll let it slide. And actually my longest standing friend, Pilar, who just had her first child, I'm so proud of her. I've been friends with her since 7th grade, and we became friends because we liked a lot of the same alternative and punk rock bands, and we still do to this day. And so I think that would have been like the thing we started to bond over, and then we would have been like, I think we would have been inseparable and annoyed the shit out of everyone around us. Like we would have, I think it would have been a lot. And then we would have pulled middle school Danielle into it, and Danielle would have been the one who fought all our battles for us.
Or told on us because I would steal stuff from Delia's or Claire's. I actually, Mark and I were talking about this, and they're saying that like all of a sudden we're in our 30s and we're gonna go see bands that we listened to in high school. This weekend, right? And so it's a funny thing that you said that about friendships and about sort of being on the outside, right? So it's sort of like I didn't go to school with any white people. I think there were like 10 white people in my entire high school. And so all of the Latino kids that I was friends with, once we went from junior high school to high school, I started liking alternative music and rock music and more punk music, and they all thought I was a weirdo. But it was this like sort of disconnect between all of the kids that had been born, the diaspora kids who had been born in the United States, but all represented their flags and were like, and meanwhile I was born in Ecuador and I sort of came here, and so I wasn't, but I still wasn't Ecuadorian enough. And so it was just this really weird liminal space of like, okay, I'm already an outsider, but I'm an outsider extra because of the things that I like and the things that I connect. Because like very much like you, all I listened to was rock music and Latino rock music. So I had those two things, and I think like all of this has shaped.
Was Juanes really big? Were you like
Juanes was huge.
Oh, that's like all the alternative like Latino kids. Like we were all
like,
So I'm thinking of that video. What's her name? T.S. Madison. Puerto Rican. It's so interesting you say that too, because like I also wanted to. There's a little bit of that, not as much as I would probably do. Puerto Rican. Sorry.
Stop.
Not as much as I would probably want to do. I really want to write like super music books sometime because that's such a huge part of my childhood. But I think of how much hey, Carter, can you ban Danielle Clayton from this event? Ban Danielle. It was that thing of like, I'm already an outsider. So the school that I went to, where I grew up in Riverside, California, the majority of the kids I went to school with were Latinx, Black, or Asian. And it was sort of like, that's how it was. And so culturally, it was weird to be that on top of, like, because we live in a world of white supremacy. And then it was even weirder if you liked alternative music. And then on top of that, it was even weirder for me because I was clearly Latino and the kids would usually start speaking Spanish to me, but because I was adopted and I had a Japanese last name, they were like, we don't even want to deal with this. And it was often that way of like, that is too weird. We don't want to understand it. Go over there. And so, yeah, it was really difficult. But I will say that, like, I feel like music, it was the same thing. Like, maybe I was weird. Maybe they couldn't understand it. But like, in that part of Southern California, there was this band called Union 13 that was huge. And they were a hardcore band who sang half of their lyrics in Spanish. And it was that thing of like, you're weird. We don't really like you, but you also have a Union 13 patch on your backpack. So, okay, that's acceptable. Like, it was that thing of like, if you had this one thing and you understood it, it just was like a balm over all the weirdness of middle school.
Yeah. So, side note, one of the things that like really changed life for me was when I went to Ecuador at 15 and discovered like punk rock music in Spanish.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's what all of my cousins were listening to, and they were like, "You like NoFX?" And I'm like, yes. But so here we are. Like, let's talk about music in our work, right?
Yeah.
I create a playlist. I tailor a playlist to everything that I write.
Everything.
I have an instrumental fantasy playlist, and then I have one with lyrics, because I have two modes, right? Sometimes I need completely Danielle, that is not true. I save my sad Latino music when I take a shower.
I literally heard you write to sad Latino music. I've literally heard it through your headphones in the office. So there's nothing wrong with that. I do it too. So I'm technically on the team. But
it's just Cheyenne ballads. That's it.
The ballads, you got to. The boleros.
So do you think that music shapes the way that you write? Like, for me, I think it helps with the cadence of language, right? Because I love poetry. I grew up, I wanted to be a poet, and then I was like, oh, poets make less writers than prose writers. So like, let's
You're not wrong.
Figure this out. Yeah.
Well, because we also grew up like obsessing over song lyrics and lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
And poetry. And so I think my sense of rhythm and my sense of cadence in even basic sentence writing, a lot of it comes from certain bands and musicians who wrote a specific way that I wouldn't have picked up otherwise. I also have to write to music. I can't write to anything else. I make, just like you, I make incredibly intense thematic playlists. Well, I make thematic playlists for each book, and then I have mood playlists where
mood.
Here's sad music, like To Each of Us a Desert. A lot of Each of Us a Desert I wrote to Florence and the Machine and Murder by Death. And we're both Murder by Death fans. And it's sad desert music. And it was
It is sad.
Yeah. Thing. And so the Insiders, I alternated between like extreme pop and like punk rock because there's a little bit of both in Hector. I love that Danielle thinks we asked her this question. We know you write to Maluma.
Who introduced you to Maluma, baby, first of all?
Which I also thirst over Maluma at all times.
I love getting like Instagram messages of just pictures of what Maluma is doing on tour from Danielle in our group chat, as if I haven't already seen it and liked it.
Yeah, salivated over it because it's Maluma. There's a little bit, like you get a little bit of taste of Hector's music, like his music taste in the book or whatnot, but it's everything. Like if I was not a writer and I could make it work, I would do something that would be my whole life. Like I still play music to this day. It's my everything. And one day I do want to write a music book. I just haven't found the right story for it yet. So I just put little hints of it into the things that I write.
I think you should write a music graphic novel. Where you can see the picture of the instruments.
It's been 2 years, so I feel like I could talk about this. I didn't write the whole thing. I wrote a proposal, and I've been ghosted for like 2 years. And it's a really good story, and I really like it, but I haven't like resurrected the idea because I want to hear back from them. Like, do they want to do this? But so there is an idea. I don't remember what it's called, but it's adorable, and it's about a kid who's classically trained in like classical music until a boy he has a crush on introduces him to punk rock, and it's all about the clash between respectability and what his parents think a good future is, and this idea that this kid is actually introducing him to music that speaks to him, where he's good at playing music and he's good at playing the violin, but that doesn't mean he necessarily loves it. And it's this whole thing. I'm sitting on it.
Editor, I need your editor to buy that right now. I know she's watching. I won't say anything.
I'll just take that idea and we'll just make it a book, like, because they're just.
It has to be graphic novel. Yeah. I don't know why. I'm stuck in my ways.
Yeah.
I think that there's a very close connection between music, like rock music is music of rebellion, right? Like music of going against the grain, and so there she is. And I think that like that parallels writing true stories about marginalized kids.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's just wild to me, the people who are like, oh, I don't want to read this book because this book is political, or I don't want to, like, this band is being too political. Writing fiction is political, right? Right. Like music is supposed to be political, especially rock music. Like imagine NoFX not doing politics in their songs. Rage Against the Machine, what are they raging against?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that these things just sort of go hand in hand. And like, what is art if not the only way, the only outlet for your voice when everything else is like terrible around you?
Yeah, and it's that thing where I think so many people are so used to the default that they think their book or the things they're saying there's no politics in them because they're not inherently talking about a political process, or they haven't said anything about being liberal or conservative. But the things you say and all of that shit is political by default. Even if it's a neutral position or a nihilist position, that's still politics. It's the world. It's a social thing. It's always there. And and so I like to toe the line between being open about it, but then also being much more subtle about it. Like I feel like Anger is a Gift is very direct in that. I feel like Each of Us a Desert is not. And it frustrated people because they expected my social commentary to be much more direct. I think with the Insiders, there is some of it. I think I do talk a lot about the sort of historical weight of homophobia and what homophobia means now versus what it meant 30, 40 years ago. I think there is a lot about neutrality. In particular, Miss Heath, one of the things I wanted to write about is how people, because they're biased, because of the world we live in, can imagine an entire narrative for a kid of color, for a queer kid, especially for a queer kid of color, without ever asking them a question. And they don't see that as a political act. They don't see that as a bad thing at all. And this is a book about what are the ramifications of imagining that you understand a kid's life. There's a moment later in the book where, and it wasn't something I came up with until very late in the process too, where Miss Heath, this head of security who just doesn't believe Hector, who is not helping him with the bullies, and she pulls him aside and is like, is everything okay at home? Are you having like a difficult home life? And that moment is so enraging because she has imagined that this kid is acting out and he's behaving badly because people like that have difficult home lives. When the reality is his home life rules, his parents are great, his abuela is one of the most important people in his life, but because she can't just listen to this kid and believe him, she has this whole narrative that she just plops down on top of him. And so even if that character were real and in the real world, she would probably say what I'm doing is not politics, it's not a political thing, but it is. And I think when it concerns what imagination a person has, or in this case, the lack of imagination, that is an inherently political act.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a question here from Madison.
Okay.
Asks, how did you, we talked a little bit about this, but how did you decide the rules of how the kids would interact with the group? And this is from AJ, who's watching.
This also changed because there was a version of this at the proposal stage when we were taking the book around, because I'd written this very, very long, like 8,000 to 10,000 word outline of the book, where the rules of the room used to be that if you were in the room, you could request a magical power, and only if it was used for good, you would get it. And so a lot of the frustration in the early version of the book, they would ask for things and it wouldn't grant it because they weren't pure of heart. And so how it changed is, as we, with my editor Stephanie, as we moved away from this notion of them wielding powers and thinking of it as just a room that is there, that there's no sort of discovery process about what the kids can necessarily do. It becomes, what can the room do for them? And so as I was imagining it, thought, okay, this is a literal safe space. What does that mean? At any moment, whatever the kids could do, whatever the kids could travel to, because there's a little bit of time wonkiness, physical location weirdness or whatnot, it always had to be, is this an act that keeps them safe, that is aligned with this? So that is the guiding force throughout it. And so initially, that's why all the room does is just show up for Hector. But then that thing of like, when you're being bullied, sometimes that bulliness leads to hunger, it leads to exhaustion. It's tiring to be bullied. So then that's why the first time, or one of the early times, the room just has a bed in it and allows Hector to sleep without wasting time. Like to just sleep. And so sometimes the room just has a very literal application of safe, but then as the book goes on, that idea of what is safe becomes more and more complicated. And I don't want to get into some of those things because it's a spoiler. There's some little plot twists in there. And there's certainly still some of the logic of, if the kid wants to use the room for something that maybe could harm someone else, or maybe isn't a good idea, the room sort of has its own morality. And there's almost this sense that it is sentient in listening to them and paying attention to them. Maybe
it's an android room. I'm just kidding.
That's a good guess, but no, that's not what I know what it is. You're not gonna.
You better know what it is. You wrote it.
Oh, I know what everything is. I have it all planned. It's in a separate document. There's a whole thing if I ever.
Okay, so we are reaching almost the 10-minute mark. So I want to ask you, Abby. Abby asks, would you ever want to read? Would you ever want someone to read your books the way that you used to read on Mark Reads?
Oh, people do already. I still get tagged in it, actually. I love it. It's great. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's through Twitter. I'm trying to think. There was a blogger that did Anger is a Gift. And it was interesting, too, because then I got to see it from the creator's side as well. Because there's some punch in the throat things in Anger is a Gift, and getting to see someone suffer. And I was like, oh, that's why this is entertaining. Oh, I get this now. But yeah, I love it. I think it's flattering and amazing. So yes, absolutely. They're around. They're on the internet.
I love it. I'm going to save Christian's question for last, but I want to ask, what are you reading right now? What is refilling your well? Look, pandemic has been really rough. Pandemic has been rough. Oh, wait, before that, how has pandemic changed the way you write, if at all? I think that because it's changed mine. It makes me focus a little bit more because I need to focus away from the sadness of reality.
That.
Danielle called me a liar.
That's not true. How dare you? Is it? Well, okay. We'll talk. No, I think you and I. There's an interesting thing because you and I have also been ridiculously prolific during the pandemic.
Oh yeah, I wrote a bunch of books.
Understandably, the few times I've talked about it online or something, like people get frustrated and angry at it. I think some of that is misplaced because I'm not controlling the pandemic. But at the same time, I understand that frustration because the vast majority of my creative friends have mostly been unable to work. It has just completely blocked them. I think in my case, so to give you some context, so I wrote The Insiders. I started it when Danielle and Zoraida and I were in Hawaii. We were on the Big Island. It was like January 3rd or 4th. And I wrote The Insiders in like 2 months. And so I wrote it, finished it at the end of February 2020. So that was when this happened. I did not write. I wrote maybe 2 or 3 short stories all of 2020. I did mostly editing. I had to edit Each of Us a Desert. I had to edit a bunch of short stories, but I did not write a novel until this year. And so far, I've written 3 whole novels, rewrote one of those 3 novels, and I'm currently 25K into a 4th one. Part of it is actually, I mean, Daniel makes a joke about it. I have to work because I don't have a sugar baby or a sugar mama paying these bills. That's what it is. And I that comes from my many years of hustling, many years of grinding and trying to make this happen. And also, like, when you need to pay bills, that's how it works. Like, you know, I am a mid-list writer. I'm not on any bestseller lists. I sell pretty solidly, but not door-breaking or whatever. So the main way that I make money is selling a new project, which means I need to finish a project, turn it in, get that acceptance payment, and then move on to the next one. And so I did a lot of that setup work in 2020. And then 2 things happened this year. One is I had to start writing the projects I sold in 2020. And the other one is I lost time on a lot of them because of the pandemic, because my editors saw the supply chain thing happening and were like, we need to get your book in earlier. And so I lost time. I had books that I thought were going to be due later that ended up getting months and months cut off their deadlines. So I just didn't really have a choice. So it sucks. I cannot answer either of Christian's questions. Like, fully, I really can't. If I told you what I was reading now.
That's my question.
But didn't they ask that too?
No.
You did.
Is it? Oh,
what are you working on next? What are you currently
Sorry,
reading?
I'm taking credit. I'm taking credit for not reading. Reading is supposed to be my job.
So I'm reading something. Daniel, I already read it.
Daniel is acting like we haven't already read The Marvelers.
Marvelers is so good. You're all going to explode. It's so good. I have been reading things. I've read a few books for Blur, but I can't talk about them yet because they haven't been announced. I am doing research on a project for the book I'm writing now. And so I can't tell you what that is because it'll just reveal a whole bunch. But I will say October 6th, I get to tell all of you. So in 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks from today, just remember today, you are all going to lose your minds. All of you.
My stomach just flip-flopped because, like, when you go on a ride, because I know what the secret is, and I'm so hyped, bro.
Yeah. So let me do. I will say this. I went to Charis Books to sign books here in Atlanta, and I did buy some books, so we can do that. I did not have a paperback version of this, but Nick Stone's Odd One Out is, I think, her most underrated book and probably my favorite one. I love this messy book so much. I'm obsessed with it. They had a paperback, so I was like, oh, I want the paperback copy. I haven't read this, but I'm auto-read author for me. It's the only one of her books I haven't read, but I got Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe.
And there's a companion novel that just got announced.
What?
Yeah, today.
What?
Yeah.
Don't play with me.
I'm not playing with you, bro. It got announced on it's here on. Do you even get Publishers Marketplace or Publishers Week?
I was also on an airplane this morning and then visited multiple bookstores while sweating out of every pore of my body because it's really hot here today. So and also my social media is a mess. So anyway, this came out today. My blurb is on the back of the book. I loved this book so much. This is the sophomore novel from J. Cole's Things We Couldn't Say.
I love that cover. It's beautiful.
This book is so good and so complicated. And I'll say that for later. Okay. There
it is.
This copy I ordered when it came out and it got lost in the mail, so I bought a second version of it, which is Ace of Spades. I can't wait to read this. I'm so excited. And then the other thing I bought is I read this. This is the last project I did for Mark Reed's. But I never owned physical books, so I bought the box set of what is this series called? The Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I adore these books. They're amazing, and I want physical copies to have around. So those are upcoming reads. And then, so what are you working on next? I will say... What did you gather?
I gathered my books. So this is my book, which I bought at Target. I'm reading My Heart is a Chainsaw.
At Target and it was sold out.
Oh, yay. So I'm reading My Heart is a Chainsaw and A Lot Like Adios. I'm rereading this because I already read it, but this book is so sexy in a very classy way.
Classy, because this is a
it's yeah. And so My Heart is a Chainsaw, I can already tell. I read Stephen Graham Jones like 5 pages at a time.
Oh,
because his work gives me, because it's real terror, right? It's terror that actually happens to people, and it gives me literal chills.
Oh, yeah, I have The Only Good Indians. It's like right, where is it? It's like right.
Yeah.
Like, it's just out of range of it. Yeah, every 10 pages, I'm sweating. Like the way he writes is so nerve-wracking.
It is. It's urgent.
Okay, so
what are you working on next?
Okay, here we go. This Friday, or maybe next week, I will be getting line edits on the next book after The Insiders. It is also a standalone, and it is based on the second half of the first book I ever wrote. I can't tell you the title. I can only tell you it is about chaos. If you think The Insiders is chaos, this book is the most chaotic, absurd thing I've ever written. It is the funniest thing I've ever written. And it's about time travel. No, I can't tell you anymore because I really want it to be a surprise, and I'm so proud of this.
Okay.
Then I wrote.
Is it a hot tub time machine?
No, it is. I'll pitch it as, what if the dog from Coco showed up in your life to grant you the ability to remake or redo one moment in your life, except no one can figure out why they showed up to help you. And they just annoy the crap out of you every 5 minutes and just
my God.
Of your life. It is, I love this book so much. And it has easily my favorite plot twist I've ever written. Ever.
Okay.
Like, I had a friend read it and they got to it and said, I want to burn your house down. And I was like, that's what I want. Like, that's what I want from plot twist.
I'm glad that you're becoming the writer you were meant to be.
Yeah.
So for
I just say real quickly that my next YA is also done. It is a dual point of view, first person horror novel about a cult. And it is incredibly messed up. And I'm very excited about that. And then 2 other projects I can't tell anyone.
Yeah. I have so I'm not publishing any more YA for the moment.
Yeah.
But until I find another idea that really strikes me. But so I'm gonna be in the adult space for a little while. And my next book, it hasn't been announced yet, but it is in the vein of Orquídea Divina, as in there's magic in the real world, and there's not going to be time travel, but there is going to be like discovering of like a family lineage through time, and like murder. Like a murder mystery. So it's going to be the weirdest book that I've ever written, but probably not the weirdest book that I'm going to write. I have 2 secret books that I can't announce, but hopefully next year. One of them literally can't be announced for a year, but that's fine. And
you're just going to text me that later, right? Do I know what it is?
No.
Okay. Did Danielle say hit my Cash App?
Danielle said hit my Cash App. She didn't even have a Cash App, first of all. She has
all our PAs violated and
oh yeah, for sure. And then I have I'm going to be re-releasing my old adult romances under Zoe Castile. So because I got my rights back from the terrible publisher that I was with.
I'm so happy for you. Hi, Carter.
Hey there. Do you both want to go through how people can find you on the internet?
Sure. You can find me on the internet on Instagram at Zoraida Solo. And I'm trying not to be on Twitter, so I'm sorry.
Don't look at me there. Don't perceive me. I'm Mark the Stuff on Instagram and Twitter. Please don't add me on Facebook. I don't.
I deleted my Facebook. Also, if you want to listen to 2 people talk about the publishing industry, you can listen to Deadline City by me and Danielle Clayton. It's really just Danielle being mean to me for 30 minutes. And sometimes we interview friends. Mark has an episode as well, so check out Mark's episode.
The episode that you two do with Jason Reynolds is my favorite thing y'all have ever done, because it's basically Danielle bullying Jason Reynolds for an hour.
Yeah, Danielle is so mean to Jason.
Jason get bullied, you need to do it. It was justified bullying too, because you asked some very good questions about speculative fiction and why Jason doesn't really doesn't write it, didn't really get it. You have an amazing conversation. It's wonderful.
So if you order The Inheritance of Rokita Divina from Storia Bookshop, I will send you a book plate and a bookmark.
There's still of these lovely signed book plates as well.
There are.
They're very rare. I think I have a bunch of them here, but I only have sent out maybe 100. So these are not like wildly available on purpose. So this is one of the
exclusive.
Yep.
Yeah. You can get both of those books down there in that link below, right? Yeah, there. Thank you. Thank you for the help pointing. And just an FYI for events that we have coming up soon. This Thursday, we have an event for a pop culture fantasy cookbook. And we're going to be making Mordor lava cakes, which is really cool. So that's on Thursday at 7 p.m. And also just an FYI, because I know a lot of people in this crowdcast right now watching really like YA. We have 2 tickets left for our first in-person YA event with Chloe Gong. Yeah, so first in-person event at all since the pandemic.
Oh my God, I wish I was in New York for that.
Oh, I love Chloe.
Yeah.
A paperback event.
It's for Our Violent Ends, and it's November 18th. So yes, go grab those 2 tickets. If you are still listening to me talk, you should be on the page buying the tickets right now.
Let me go, because I will be home for November.
Surprise, Zoraida's actually getting the last tickets. All right. Thank you both so much for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We will see you all soon.
Thank you, everyone.